What a film. What a film. There's so many ideas in the film that we put together a very special panel. I introduced Michael Barker, the co-president of Sony Pictures Classics. Yes? But I have two other special panelists, because we have, stand please, Dr. Dion Metzger, who is an actual doctor who's going to talk about it from a psychiatric perspective. And she's also a film critic, doctor by day, film critic by night, of the Popcorn Reel in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome, Dion Metzger, Dr. Dion. And I also wanted another perspective, so we have the filmmaker Joe Crisafulli, who is in the National Organization of Italian Americans in Film and Television, and he'll give us that perspective. Please stand, Joe Crisafulli. And some of you may have recognized him because he presented a short film here a couple of years ago with his wife, the filmmaker Melissa Batista. Okay, I'd like for you to give us a little bit of a historical perspective, Joe.
Well, it's something that I just assume most viewers of the picture aren't aware of, but in our organization, we try to make our fellow Italian Americans aware of. Mr. Coppola is clearly knowledgeable about his indigenous Latin history. All the things that he portrays, he fictionalizes them, he mixes some things together to form one coherent narrative, happened or in the 60s BC. Claudius Pulcher, he is most renowned maybe in Italian history for crashing the most sacred, holy festival in ancient Italian culture, which is the festival of the holy good goddess, the Sacra Bona Dea, and he crashed it in drag, as is presented, at the house of the Pontifex Maximus. Today we consider the Pope, the head of the Roman Church, who at the time was Julius Caesar. And it was total sacrilege because it was run by the Vestal Virgins, who were the most holy people in ancient Rome, to guard the rites, the rituals of the ancient goddess Vesta. And he was brought on charges of indecency, of trying to rape a Vestal Virgin, also the Pope's wife, the Pontifex Maximus's wife. And Catalinus also, around that time, was part of a conspiracy to overthrow the ancient Italians at the time had two heads of state at once. They were so against tyranny, what we would call the president, to overthrow them through force. One of them was Cicero. They both got their just desserts at the end. I think Claudius Pulcher was tracked down in the street. I think he added some Mussolini in there, hanging him upside down. But he's very knowledgeable about the history we share, that we brought to the world. And he specifically chose the Republic of Rome, I think, not the empire, because American democracy was consciously emulating ancient Roman democracy, executive branch with equal but separate power of a legislative branch made up the Senate and the plebeian assembly, for instance. And so I think he's very knowledgeable and hoping that we look backward to look forward.
Thank you. And now Dr. Dion, Dr. Metzger.
One thing that I thought was really interesting about the film is it was really able to portray society's obsessive thoughts in terms of, rather than just good versus evil, we really saw the obsession with personal gain. And that was a big part of, I think, the draw, because sometimes when you step back and you look at it, you don't see as much. But with this film, we're able to see just how obsessed society can get with certain things. And also, one thing that I thought was really, really great was even when Caesar was referring to his own mania, he actually used the word, but we really were seeing mania in action, in a cinematic form, where we're seeing the obsessive, the complete focus, the delusional thought. I just think they did a great job in terms of getting the obsessive nature of society, especially when it comes to game.
Thank you. So this was like my 4th time seeing this film, and because I've seen it so many times, I was aware of the narrative thread and how he built everything. But the first time I saw it, it seemed disparate. But seeing it for the 4th time, I see the brilliance in how he added each section and segment, and how it really was a brilliant job of pulling the narrative together. And also a cautionary tale for today, but I'm going to ask Mr. Coppola how much of that is meant to be a warning about today. We're going to have you, Michael, we're going to bring on, we have James Bond and Joaquin up there, and we are going to bring on Mr. Coppola now. Francis Ford Coppola. Hello there.
Well, everybody, thank you for coming tonight. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you. I don't know if you can hear me. I can't hear me, but I hope you're hearing me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, this is Chaz Ebert. Can you see us on stage? What I want you to see is this beautiful audience who assembled here at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning, to see your film and the reception that it received. Everybody, Mr. Francis Ford Coppola.
There are many doors into a movie, and I want you to choose my door because I wanted to make a movie about America's connection with the Roman Republic for many years, and I finally got to do it, and I know it can be somewhat demanding. As the gentleman said, everything in the movie really happened either in ancient Rome or in modern New York. There's no fiction really in the movie, as strange as it may sound. America, as was said, was founded as the historic counterpart of the Roman Republic because, like the Roman Republic, we did not want a king. And of course, the colonies were ruled by a British king, and we wanted to have the concept of the Republic, which was created by Rome when they ousted their Tarquin king. Rome didn't have a king in ancient times, but he was terrible and they got rid of him. But thank you so much for being here, and I'm happy to discuss the movie and answer any questions you may have. It's and I'm so grateful that you came to see it, and thank you and for all the hosts standing there for your perspective. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Francis.
So I'm going to have the first question presented to you by your friend Michael Barker.
Hi. Francis, I am telling you, when you see this movie in a movie palace like this, it's really it's a spiritual religious experience. And I have to tell you, you know as well as I do, I've seen it many times. And when you watch it, what I realize is what you always talked about since the very beginning, that at the center of it is this love story. And that's right in the very middle of the movie. when they get together. And then there's this whole idea of the nature of time and the order of time. But today, it may have something to do in the context of what's going on in the world and what's been going on in the last year. I found the end so emotionally moving, Francis. You have no idea how moving the end of this film is, because we feel from you a positivism, some hope at the very, very end. And I always forget about that. And today, it's just a very revelatory, moving experience. So I wonder if you could talk about how the movie is also a hope for the future.
Well, as you know, I'm not only a father, but a grandfather, and miraculously, I'm a great-grandfather. And of course, my anxiety is that the children, our beloved children, are going to find themselves in this wreck of a world, a world that basically does not make sense. And of course, you know, what's going on today in the world, for example, in Sudan and in different parts of the world, is human children who are potential Archimedes and Mozarts and Beethovens are being slaughtered and never getting a chance to emerge and benefit our human family as they would. That the children are our sacred future, and no children anywhere should lose their life over the stupidity of war. I mean, I heard
Here, that's right.
there was a law that you had to be 50 years old in order to go to war, that there would be no war, because the 50-year-olds create the wars, but they send children to fight it for them, and it's absurd. I'm happy to talk on every level. I can talk for a long time with you if you want. I'm a little nervous that you're all standing up and I'm sitting down. Would you guys like to sit
No,
down?
It's
no.
great, Francis. You're larger than life. It's fantastic.
Oh, all right. So, basically, let me start with this idea that sort of, you know, if you were to look at the 10 words or concepts that we rule our lives by, it would be things from 1 to 10, like, you know, time, money, work, and so forth, politics, government, sport, which is a wonderful thing, and so forth. But each of these things oppresses us, and we took them from nature. We took the concept of time from nature, but we divided it into minutes and hours and weeks and days, and you bill by time. If you're a lawyer, you bill a lot by time. You have to work 5 days a week, maybe someday you'll work 4 days a week, but all of that we invented. Nature didn't give us that. What nature gave us was dawn and dusk and the winter solstice and the equinox, all of which are beautiful. So time, which rules us, could be made to be dawn, dusk, solstice, equinox, which are beautiful things and which we can enjoy. The same with money. There was no money in nature. The first money came about really probably in terms of coinage a few 2,000 years ago, because soldiers should carry some coins, so that instead of stealing the pigs and the chickens and the maidens, and then be fighting them as they were on their way to fight their stupid war, that they could pay for it. So money first began really as something that didn't exist, that we created it in the form of coinage so that our soldiers, about 2,000 years ago, I'm not sure, there was debt. And debt is a wonderful book called Debt, the First 5,000 Years by David Graeber. But that was social debt. That was, I owe my parents my life. How do you pay your parents back for what you owe them? You pay your parents for giving you your life by giving them what they most want, which is grandchildren. So social debt was paid within social terms. It was considered in ancient times not sacred to bury your dead. So the family that lived near the moiety that lived near your village, they would bury your dead, but you had a debt to bury their dead. Or if it was learned that it was better to take a bride from some of the family rather than flirting with your cousins and sisters. And so if you gave this other family the opportunity to have a bride from your family, there was a social debt that they could have a bride for their family. So debt is a beautiful social thing. It's not like what they do to the insanity of making kids be in debt for their college education, which is the one thing that the government could give them for free, as the University of California did originally. So each of the 10 things that are pleasant, that we invented them, and therefore we have the right to reinvent them, to make them be something beautiful, enjoyable. For example, work. What is work? We all know that there's a kind of work which you do for the pleasure of it. That the work I do, and that all artists do really, is work, but it's really, if there was no money, we wouldn't want to be paid for it anyway. Then there's something called toil. You could divide the number 2 thing on the list, which is work, or 3, money, time, work, into toil and play. And basically, in ancient times, even the Greeks, the Spartans that's why they wanted slaves. They wanted someone who would do the toil. Today we can have robots do the toil. I mean, anyone who's been to San Francisco and has been in a Waymo car, that's a robot. And it drives better than a human can drive. So we can divide work into play and toil and let the robots speak. Robots, by the way, is a word that came from a Czech writer, Karel Čapek, who wrote a play called Rousseau's Universal Robots. The word robot in Czech means worker. But play is how we get all our greatest ideas. I could outline to you how what we learned when we were playing with our kids are the greatest inventions of our humanity. When the Greeks had a toy that was like a steam engine that spun around, but it was just for the fun for the kids. It was a toy. Or I am convinced that the wheel was never invented by humans in the real world. They used to drag things in sledges or put a few tree trunks under it, but they made for their kids a little toy that the kids could drag, but the kids couldn't do it with the tree twigs under. So someone said, let's make a wheel. And then they looked at what these kids were dragging around and said, let's make a big one. So the greatest work, and I can go through everything, movable type, the terrible invention of gunpowder was originally made to delight the children with fireworks. So we humans should spend our time playing with our kids, and we will be inventing wonderful things, and let toil be done by robots, which we are capable of building. And I could go on and talk about everything. I don't want to bore anyone, but government is absurd. There was never this idea that there would be people whose profession would be politicians. That's insane. In Siena, in ancient times, there was sort of mayor of the month kind of person in the rule of the night. Government should be like jury duty. When I was a kid, for a while went to military school, and actually the same military school that Donald Trump went to. And I was a poor kid, a tuba player in the band, but I was one day officer of the day. Officer of the day was great because you wore a red sash and you had a sword, and your job was to just go around and check the entire battalion, make sure the horses of the troopers were okay. You went to the infirmary and made sure that the kids in the infirmary were being fine, and you just basically checked everything out, and then the next day you turned it over to Jane Jacobs idea of the American city. So I think that you should be the mayor of the month, and then you check out and go back being a dentist or something. You know, we should not have politicians who are that profession for life, because they will only create another competitive group of who gets the privileges, the perks, and the money. I could go through all of them. You know, obviously, I'm very interested. Not for me. Just an old grandpa. I don't have all that left. But I want our beautiful children to live in a wonderful world that they're entitled to, and that we, as a human family, we're a family of geniuses. That everybody in that audience is a relation of everyone sitting near you or not near you. We're all one family, and you're all cousins, and every one of you is a genius. Maybe you haven't discovered your gift yet, or you didn't. Or often what happens is you don't get the gift you wanted, and you get another gift. I didn't get the gift I wanted. There are filmmakers, I won't name them all, but people like, well, William Wyler, or even Roman Polanski, or Steven Spielberg, they can just see the movie in one glimpse. I didn't get that gift. But I got the gift that I'm willing to rewrite it 1,000,000 times to make it better. And I got another gift, which is a unique gift, is a prescience. That when I work on a movie, it tends to have relevance 10 or 20 or 30 years later. Like I made the Conversation movie 15 years before Watergate, or I made my movie The Rain People, which was about a form of women's liberation, 20 years before the political movement gave birth to the women's movement. And I made Megalopolis. I was thinking of it 30 years ago, and it came true this year. The very thing that I had shown in the end of the movie actually happened. And then we, like Rome before us, are in danger of losing our republic. So my gift is really more that, you know, that I'm willing to just keep working no matter what until I finally get some sense out of it. And of course, this ability to, like Cassandra, see the future. But again, let me not. I know I'm a big shot today, and I'm up there on the big screen, but I love to talk to people interacting rather than just lay out my ridiculous ideas.
So I have one comment and a question for you. Since your movies sort of foresaw some of the things happening in history, can you please make another movie about how we get out of this?
Well, I think okay. We get out of this by understanding that we have to leap over this period, that we must, you know, we live in a patriarchy, but the human family, if we're Homo sapien, we don't know exactly how many years the Homo sapien family has existed because it's so much before written history. But the guess is it's either 300,000 years, 200,000, maybe 400. Usually these predictions turn out to be older than we think. And much of the time we lived in matriarchies. And of course, that's a beautiful book that says it quickly, which is called, I think, The Chalice and the Blade. I think it's by Rian Eisler. And it's a good read, The Chalice and the Blade. The more serious anthropologist who gave evidence of this idea is Martita Gimbutas, who you may have heard of. I think Martita Gimbutas was from Lithuania. At any rate, there is also a book written by the great David Graeber, who wrote Death, the First 5,000 Years, and another very good book, stupid title, but great book called Bullshit Jobs. And he and a colleague wrote a new book called The Dawn of Everything. And in this book, The Dawn of Everything, they pretty much say that probably 78, maybe more percent of our Homo sapien life was spent in egalitarian matriarchies in which women in matriarchies weren't like men. Women didn't say, I am queen, you are my slave. That's a male idea. That happened about 10,000 years ago, or whenever the horse was first domesticated. It's the horse that turned people into like Kurosawa, where they came down, killed everyone, enslaved the women. That's recent history. We have to go back to what we were like by nature, where we were egalitarian, we worked together. Men and women also were friends. And women didn't say, you're my slave. Women said, let's work together to make sure there's water for the kids and there's enough to eat. And women discovered agriculture, and women discovered metallurgy and making copper and what have you. And men once, also because in our mammal family, the women are the sexual choosers, men wanted to make them slaves so they would lose that. But this idea of patriarchy, as the movie says, this is going nowhere. We have to live in a world where we live as together, men and women working shoulder to shoulder to make better lives for our children. And our children are sacred. Children cannot be killed. The great Aeschylus wrote in his unbelievable work in Greece that once one brother killed the children of the other brother, that's unforgotten. We are not able to forgive people who kill our children, so let's kill no children. All the children on this earth are our children, and they are safe because they are our future. So, I think, yes, we can leap over this insane patriarchy that is now leading us to disaster, and with men and women shoulder to shoulder, and the lives of children being precious and absolutely safe, can we now make a paradise for these children that we are entitled to? Because the human being, as the movie says, is unlike anything else. We are a wonder. And this was said, by the way, the great Italian Pico de Terra, I think, in the 16th century, when he wrote Origins of Man, and got in trouble for it. In fact, never lived very long. But we human beings, it's incredible. They must spend $10 trillion a year in advertising today. Selling what? Selling little bits of happiness. If you buy this, you're going to be a little happy. If you buy this, you cannot sell happiness to happy people. So we're kept unhappy so that it's good for business. And this is all part of this patriarchy that we live in. It's absurd. And so many things that are being today, you can't even make fun of them anymore because they're so absurd they make fun of themselves.
That actually what you said sets me up for the question that I wanted to ask you. One of the reasons that this film festival exists, when Roger and I co-founded the film festival along with Nate Cohen, we talked about empathy, and Roger always said that movies are a machine that generates empathy that allows us to put ourselves in the shoes of a person of a different race or age or gender or socioeconomic status, so that we can learn more about the people we're sharing this earth with, and we can empathize with people and realize we are all on the same journey together. And one of the things that I noticed that was so beautiful about the idea of stopping time, somehow going above physics to figure out how to do that, I noticed that in the movie, the most hope came when science, technology, anthropology, and medicine were all kind of put together, and that it all really boiled down to love. When he lost his ability to stop time, The only way he was able to manage time was through a real, sincere, passionate love. I thought that was so beautiful. And then you showed that this baby, just like indigo kids who are being born all over the world, also is going to be someone, is the future, and will have maybe that ability to influence how we love, how we manage time, and how we perhaps make the world a better place. Where did you come up with this idea of going above physics in order to stop time?
Well, first of all of those things which you enumerated in your talk, race, caste, all that is not really true. In other words, you are my cousin. You look different because we know why. We know that in natural selection in Sweden there wasn't a lot of sunlight, and sunlight gives you vitamin D. So the fair blonde people tended to get more vitamin D. So over a couple of hundred years, they lived longer. So more of their babies look blonde, and so Swedes are generally fair and blonde. Whereas in Asia, in Tibet, there was a lot of sand. You couldn't see very well the sand. So people who had the more narrow eyes tended to see a little better. So they lived longer and they had more babies that looked like them. So the only reason we look different than this race and class and stuff is basically easily explained. We're really just cousins. And we lived in different neighborhoods, so we look different. But we're the same, we're all equally human beings. And we share everything the same in a big sense. And we are all have this incredible talent. So the way we go beyond caste and race and stuff is to understand that it really doesn't exist. We are all one family. You and I have the same grandparents, and we have the same. We are cousins. Everybody on earth is a blood relative of everyone else, and we really, even though we look different, that's only easily explained. That it's not. It has nothing to do with the essence of what we are. So the way to get past that is to realize it's not even true. It's we are one family, and we are every one of us has incredible talent and ability, which has been talked out of us because it's hard to fleece geniuses. It's hard to get them to line up and do what you want. So we have been convinced, and a lot of effort has been done to train us to not behave as the geniuses we are. You can't even find in history, other than the Pico di, I don't know, maybe my Italian American colleague, what was his name? Pico di Terra? No, I forget. But he wrote The Origins of Man. He's the only one I could find in history who ever came out and said human beings are great, and we are. And we are great, but to be great means we owe to each other to give our children the opportunity to live in a beautiful world. I don't know that I answered your question. I'm trying.
But I like your answer. And I have to, we promise not to hold you too much longer, but I do want to give at least two people in this audience a chance to ask a question. Do we have microphones? Do we have microphones?
Don't worry
to.
Me. I can stop time, so I stop time.
Okay, and the panel, while they're getting someone from the audience, two brave people step up to ask a good question, please. And let's get somebody from the panel to ask a question.
Mr. Coppola, I know this film was 30 years in the making. Was there something that inspired you to pick it back up in 2019?
Well, the truth of the matter is, my peculiar way of working is I work on something, and because I don't have the genius of some of my colleagues where I just get it, I work and I work and I work, and everyone here knows that when you're writing and writing and writing, you start to hate what you're writing, and I eventually start to hate it, and then I abandon it, and then I go start something else, and I work and I work and I work until I hate the new thing, and I abandon that, and I look at the old one, abandon called Distant Vision. And so probably the next film, if I get to live longer, will be that I'll make Distant Vision. Because I tend to always abandon the one that I was working on because I hate, young writers in the audience know that when you're writing and you look at those, that I believe there's a hormone secreted in the bloodstream of a writer that makes them hate what they've just written. And so you start to rewriting it. So my advice to writers is don't read those pages. Write 6 pages, put it down, don't read them, and just continue. And when you've got about 120 pages, then read it, and you'll realize that may be what the rewrite should be. But yes, if someone in the audience wants to ask me a question, I'm thrilled to be able to answer.
We have first, introduce yourself, please.
My name is Brian Lee. Nice to meet you, Mr. Coppola.
Nice to see you, Brian.
Hate to ask, I'm kind of asking a technical question, although I think it speaks to the bigger themes of your film. I really like your approach to visual effects and your term poetic realism. That was like kind of how you do visual effects. And the question I had was, I wanted to know how you developed poetic realism over time, and especially which lessons you learned from some of your previous films about special effects that you applied to Megalopolis. So I'm especially thinking of your recent films like Youth Without Youth and Twixt and Tetro. You have blue screen, you have de-aging, and just a lot of interesting low-budget work and digital work. And also maybe even Dracula, because you did all of your in-camera tricks from there.
Yeah. Well, that's the key. First of all, the thing that is important about me is that I was a theater student. When I went to college, I was a theater student, and I had no idea about cinema. I was going to college, and I did very well in college in theater, and I was going to go to the Yale Drama School. But one afternoon, I was very poor. I had no money, and I was just waiting for rehearsal. And I noticed in the building they said they were showing a film by Eisenstein called October, 10 Days That Shook the World, and I had nothing to do, and I had no money to buy lunch. So I went in to see this 4-hour movie, and it was played totally silent. There was no organ track or recording music. It was absolutely silent, and it's about 4 hours long, 10 Days That Shook the World. And I couldn't believe what I saw. I never had seen anything like that. I came out and I said, God, I'm not going to go to Yale. I'm going to do that. I want to make films like Einstein, interestingly, because he was a theater guy too. So my whole approach is really of the theater mentality. So when I made Bram Stoker's Dracula, I thought, well, Dracula was made around the beginning of when movies started making, and the effects people on Dracula were all excited to do digital effects. And I said, well, I don't want to do any digital effects. I want to do everything the way filmmakers did at the beginning of cinema, when they were more, magicians. And so I said, I want to do, and in theater, of course, you do effects, but they're live. And you do it with projections and shadows and stuff. So the effects said, you're crazy. We're going to do this with digital effects. And I said, you're fired. And I hired my 16-year-old son, who was a big kid magician. He loved magic. And I said, Roman, let's do all the effects in Dracula without any digital effects. Let's do it as if we were making the film in Bram Stoker's day. And so he and I made everything in Dracula live action. And we did that in Megalopolis too. In other words, a lot of the rationale of the effects in Megalopolis, Roman was there. And of course, he has now his own career working with Wes Anderson stuff. But a lot of the effects in the movie that you saw, like the invisible dress, and many of them, all were live. And started out live. We then were able to tweak them later. But I wanted Megalopolis effects not to look so great like Marvel pictures do. I wanted it to look handmade, is the thing. And to tell you where I got that idea, in a movie, the setting can be the setting, and it could also have some value as a metaphor. Or it could be a metaphor that has some value as a setting. The example that I learned that was in Fellini's movie 8.5, which begins in a tunnel of cars all jammed, and there's a character who's like gasping for air, and other people are looking at him, and that's a metaphor that also works as a setting because it's not realistic. They're all looking at this guy choking, and then he floats out of the car and floats up into the sky. So that was a metaphor that also serves to be a setting. And what does that in common life are political cartoons. Political cartoons are always metaphors. It's a staircase showing the stock market going up, or a guy standing on a stump of a tree that's a swastika. So I decided in Megalopolis I would make all the settings, not settings, but metaphors that second level would be settings. So they're metaphors first. When you're up 5,000 feet in the sky and you kiss a woman the way that he kisses her, it's dangerous. It's as if you're 5,000 feet in the sky because everything you are, everyone you love, is going to be affected by that kiss. And so everything in Megalopolis is, all the settings are first metaphors and then they're settings, like political cartoons are. I hope that's an interesting answer.
We have one more question from the audience. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Sam, and we've met before when you took over Hollywood Center Studios in Hollywood. I was there at the opening, and you talked about the new technologies coming in and the democratization of film and how we would no longer need studios anymore. And considering the inflection point Hollywood's at today, do you consider the completion of this project the penultimate statement of the American Zoetrope dream?
Oh.
I don't know. Penultimate is a word I can never use, but I do know that that wonderful thing about Hollywood General Studios is that we had the junior high school across the street had access, and they all became apprentices. And we had all these Hollywood General Studio was filled with kids who were apprentices to the art department, to the camera department, and that's.
Yes, I was one of those apprentices.
Pardon?
I was one of those apprentices.
Oh, well, then you know what happened, that it was wonderful to have. I'm more than amply rewarded for my efforts, I'm awarded out, to tell you the truth, but the most wonderful thing happened to me, that a young man came to see me, who had just made a beautiful film that I admired. And he came and he wanted to meet me, and I said, well, that's such a great film. It was called All Quiet on the Western Front, and his name was, I think, Ebert. And he said, yes, I made that film. But I became a filmmaker because I saw Apocalypse Now. That was the greatest award. And it happened to me a few more times with Rumblefish, where people said to me, I became a filmmaker because I saw Rumblefish. That's the highest award. It beats any kind of statue they give you. It beats any check they give you. But to have a young person say, I'm making films now, and because I saw something that you did, that is the ultimate for me.
Thank you. So I have a question that I think is going to be a very good one for you. It's by Joe Crisafulli, who is with the National Organization of Italian Americans in Film and Television.
He's right there.
That's Joe. Joe, will you please ask, do you see us when we're facing this way or this way?
Well, I'm seeing you all like you look like you're Egyptians.
Okay. Well, we'll let Joe ask the question for you.
Yes, thank you, John.
Signor Coppola, grazie moltissimo per essere qua con noi, l'apprezziamo molto. Chaz wanted to bring up the notion of love in the movie, and something that I had wanted to ask you, you know, amor is the indigenous Latin ancient Italian god of love. Passio, which passione, passion comes from, is suffering for one's love. And something I love about your generation of filmmakers is that you loved cinema. You had to make the movies you had to make. You had to connect with people. You innately had that empathy. And I think it may be fair to say that some of you suffered for that love. Today, in a world where filmed footage is ubiquitous, I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I feel like there's not as much love in just being able to scroll, just being able to constantly point your phone, especially with a younger generation today. As someone who incarnates amor and passio, as an Italian, as maybe our parents suffer for us, maybe you know, you're really big on family and the children being the hope. How do you feel the passion and the love that you guys had in your generation when you had to get your hands on footage, on equipment? You had to say what you wanted to say to connect with people. What are your impressions of today where film footage is ubiquitous and everywhere? Do you think the love is still there? If not, do you think we can get back to it? Does it depend on that?
Well, what I found is that the love, the colleague, the sense of the group and of the colleague was something that I learned in theater. Because theater, we were always a group. We rehearsed together, and after the rehearsal, we'd go out together and have pizza together. We were always a group. When I went to film school, it was all about who had the editing machine, and the older students had dibs on the editing machine, and they would lock it in their room, and it was all, you were always alone. You were alone editing, or you were alone doing it, and I missed so much the group feeling. So when I started Zoetrope, the big contribution I think you made is that I treated it like theater. We were all one group of filmmakers, and we all helped each other. And since I was 4 or 5 years older than certainly George Lucas or Marty or all these wonderful people, I was able to imbue it with a sense of we're a group together. And interesting, folks, remember the picture opens with a Zoetrope logo and there's some people shouting together, Puwaba, Puwaba, Puwaba. That's the actual group who made the film, wishing each other that there would be safety and good work together and no one would be hurt. And that you actually, the film started with the voices of the group who made them. And that's always been so important to me. And I agree with you 100% that for it to just become some files that are passed around and you're looking all alone in your room, theater is about being together, doing art together the way it was. You know, the origins of theater was a Bacchus festival, and everyone was drinking wine and getting a little lightheaded and dancing around. And then some people saw that the dancers, some were better than others, so they sat down, and that became the first audience. And the audience is this group of people sharing joy together. That's why I love the idea of celebration. That we are meant to celebrate with one another, and that's a very important part of life that we do that we mustn't lose. And certainly seeing the film together. You know, I mean, the Italians after World War II were interesting because the reason there were so many wonderful, Marty Scorsese knows everything about this subject, but was the work of one filmmaker who made Open City and all of the other filmmakers worked under him, Fellini and what's his name?
Rossellini.
Yeah, though Rossellini was the father, but he had all of these wonderful people, but none of the film directors, Antonioni didn't have any assistant really that when he died, he passed it on to. So after World War II, there were maybe 50 great Italian film directors, but as they died, then there were just a handful of them. Whereas in America, every film director has 2 or 3 proteges that are meant to, it's like trees in a forest. When the tree falls, there's 3 young ones to take the place. And that's what I feel my goal for art is that I love the apprenticeship system because you pass the secrets on to the next generation, and that can happen. But one of my predictions about in the future, some girl in Ohio would be the new Mozart. Look at who won the Oscar this year. That person who made a film on their iPhone when they were beginning. So, I mean, the light of cinema is passed from generation to generation. I know I'm not answering that well, Joe, but I did my best.
So, my last question to you is, I want to make sure that I didn't give my audience any misinformation. I was on the advisory committee of the Henry Ford Foundation in Detroit, and I know you're going to be honored there on Sunday. I was invited to attend, and I can't because I'll just be leaving here. However, I was told that the Ford in your name, Francis Ford Coppola, is from Henry Ford. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. My father, in those days, my father was a great flutist or flautist. Do you guys know the difference between a flutist and a flautist? I used to ask my father, he said $50 a week. But nevertheless, my father was a flautist. He was a very fine. That's a case of a gift that he didn't want. But he worked for the Detroit Symphony and on the radio on the Ford Hour, so he would go to rehearsals, and Henry Ford and his wife would always be at the rehearsals. So my father, would say, "Good morning, Mr. Ford." And when I was born in Detroit, in my family, they often gave the middle name to the name of the employer. Also, I was born in the Henry Ford Hospital. So my name is Francis Ford because Ford was my father's employer. Yes, it's true.
Okay, all right. And the last thing I have to say, Francis, thank you for making a movie about love. Thank you.
Great movie, Francis. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I'm so grateful to you for coming and seeing the film. And I think the film works better if you see it more times because it breaks every rule you can break in what is modern addictive movie making. It breaks those rules, and you see it a few times, you start to understand that it has its own rules. So, but thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And thank
Francis.
you.
So appreciative. Thank you. And now everybody, big rock